John, another round of ESPN layoffs.
We'll discuss, Andrew. And it's NFL draft weekend, so hopefully we'll get some classic moments.
It's obvious to me right now that the Jets just don't understand what the draft's all about.
And we're back. The Marchand and Ourand Sports Media Podcast. I'm Andrew Marchand, sports media columnist for the New York Post. He's John Ourand, the media reporter for the Sports Business Journal. And John, the big news, ESPN layoffs. We're going to get to that in a moment. But first, who's up and who's down?
Who's up? Who's down?
Who's up? I'm going to stay in D.C. for my who's up, Andrew. I'm going to make it Mike Rizzo. He's the general manager of the Washington Nationals. And it looks like he's going to have a lot more money to spend on keeping his own players and maybe getting into the free agent market, which is not a bad place to be after his team couldn't afford Bryce Harper, Juan Soto, Trey Turner, Max Scherzer, you name it. We're talking about him on a media podcast because it finally looks, after more than a decade, that the Masson dispute is almost over. And really, like we've been saying this for years, it's almost over. But this time, it really looks like that. Still going to be some more negotiating, so it's not going to end tomorrow or next week. Nothing in this dispute goes quickly at all, but the Baltimore Banner, which is a fantastic publication out of Baltimore, reported that the New York Court of Appeals, in a unanimous 6-0 ruling, sided with Major League Baseball and the Nationals over the Orioles in the Masson dispute, 6-0. It's unclear if the Orioles have any legal options yet. If they do, they're going to take them. But it is clear to see where the wall falls in this case. 6-0 is a thunderous statement. What a year it's been for the RSNs, right?
Definitely. All right, my who's up is Elon Musk. Why Elon Musk? Because he's ruining Twitter, which is great because it's kind of a mild addiction that I and others have had, and I'm planning to still be on it. Still will post links to stories and video, and every once in a while chime in, but I'm very hopeful, and I think I will be spending a lot less time on it. It's not that I care that I lost my blue check mark. It's not that. It's that the blue check mark doesn't mean anything anymore. So you don't know what is actually the person and who is not the person. And also, even before this, latest guffaw from him, it just had become with the For You tab something that I don't find that useful for my job. I have a media list that is useful that I go over, that I can see your stuff and some other people's stuff very quickly and just kind of get an update on the day in terms of sports media and if there are things I need to read, but overall, Elon Musk, thank you very much for ruining Twitter.
Are you going to take your social media habits to another platform, Andrew?
I will not. I would love there not to be social media. I really would. It's nice to have a following, and I appreciate everyone who follows me, but I'm not on really any other social media. I have it. Like I have Instagram, I have TikTok. I look at Instagram a little bit, but not much. It's much better for me to spend time reading the New York Post app and website, reading SBJ, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Washington Post. Those are kind of my reading diet. And I have found, as I've kind of cut out Twitter more, reading those things, it's much healthier. And I just feel like I'm a little bit smarter reading those type of publications as opposed to just doom scrolling on Elon Musk's Bird app.
I am not where you are yet. I still appreciate it, but I can see where it's heading to that area. Let me go to who's down. My who's down, MLS Commissioner Don Garber, and it's based on an interview that friend of the pod, Roger Bennett of Men in Blazers fame, had with Alexander Sheffirin on his pod this week. Sheffirin is UEFA's president, and he said this when Raj asked whether or not the UEFA's Champions League final would ever be staged in the U.S.
This year is Istanbul, 24 is London, and 25 is Munich. And after that, let's see.
So that is a foreseeable possibility.
It's possible. It's possible.
God bless America.
I want to pick out one more clip from that pod. It is a good pod if you want to listen to it. This is what Sheffirin said about the American sports fan.
Football is extremely popular in the United States these days. Europeans are ready to pay this amount for the best, this amount for something a bit less, and this amount for even less. Americans are ready to pay this amount for the best and nothing for the less. So they will follow European football as basketball lovers in Europe follow NBA. American national team, the more players play in Europe, the better the national team will be.
We talk about this almost every other week, Andrew. MLS decided to chase dollars over distribution when it did its deal with Apple TV+. Schefren's comments make it very, very clear to me that some of soccer's biggest leagues in the world view the U.S. market as a place where they have the potential to really make inroads.
Okay, my who's down is Disney CEO Bob Iger. The reason the layoffs overall at Disney, 7,000 jobs are lost. ESPN just began theirs this week. And look, Iger is one of the great media executives in the history of our country. There's no doubt about that. The way he got there was by making great acquisitions, which was largely due to the fact that Disney basically lucked into ESPN. It's not something when they made that deal, they were thinking ESPN was going to be such a cash cow, but ESPN at times was a third of Disney's earnings and was able to, allow them to buy Pixar, etc. So Iger got to do that. Now, I understand there's no loyalty in business, all right? But when you look at what is going on with ESPN, I want everyone to remember what's going on now with the layoffs in November when they break out their earnings, and they're tremendous, which they're going to be. And so, yes, I understand how business works. I find it very greedy. Every, earnings report has to be better than the last. And so people lose their jobs. But the thing why I point to Iger and Disney is that it's a great place to work when you're working there. I worked there for 11 years. I was fortunate enough to leave on my own accord. But a lot of people aren't. Disney presents themselves as different. They call the people who work there cast members. But now for ESPN, for example, this is the 5th layoff in the last decade. Every 2 years, there's layoffs. Now, obviously, number one, that impacts the people who lose their job. Number two, it guts the place because everyone else feels like the ground is shaking under them. And then thirdly, and this is very important, merit isn't always the case on who loses their job. It just feels as if your number's up, your number's up. Over my 11 years, if it happened at certain times, I probably would have been in trouble. And so there's a lot of luck involved, and that doesn't make you different. And this is what I always said when I was there, and I say it now, that Mickey, he's a passive-aggressive MFer.
Andrew, let's take that and roll right into topic one, which is topic one with a bullet on the ESPN layoffs. They started on Monday. The two big names that came out, Mike Soltys, who is the second longest tenured executive at ESPN, been there for 43 years, was shown the door. Only Soltys' boss, Chris LaPlaca, has been there a little bit longer. And Chris, of course, is the one that sort of made the decision about, where to cut in his department, and that happened to be Mike Soltys. Russell Wolff, an executive who was in the running to become head of ESPN several years ago, been around for a long, long time, took the reins at ESPN Plus, which by all accounts has been hugely successful at Disney. But somebody else who in the reorg lost a lot of power, ended up getting layered, and was also shown the door sort of in a really unceremonious fashion. The thing that you mentioned that really strikes me is that Disney, they set themselves up to be a little bit different. They're a company that does want to embrace history. You see it in Bob Iger when he talks about how he's been with the company for nearly like half of the company's history, and he wears that as sort of a point of pride. It's very hard to engender loyalty among the rank and files when you see people who is more loyal to ESPN than Mike Soltys, who's been there for 43 years. And he's sort of not allowed to leave on his own terms. And the outpouring on social media that I saw of people that were very complimentary to Mike and the job that he did. Look, we're here to call balls and strikes. It was a total mistake to let Mike go. He's one of the best communication people in the business, not to mention at ESPN. And when you say that it's not based on merit, I don't know what that could be based on.
Well, here's one thing. ESPN's not a charity, right? So, people aren't entitled to work there forever. I mean, that's a fair thing to say. The thing that I have had a problem with when I've seen all 5 layoffs, it's just the haphazardness of it and the feeling of that no matter what you do, it doesn't necessarily matter. Now, of course, it does matter. Like Stephen A. Smith's not going anywhere. There's certain people, like Greenberg's not going anywhere. There's certain people who aren't going anywhere that they're going to keep. But when you try to act like you're different, but when in reality, you're just a number, right? You talked about 43 years for Mike Soltys. Like, I don't really care about that, right? I don't think Mike Soltys necessarily deserves 45 years because he's had 43. Like 43 is a lot. He deserves the other 2.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He deserves the other 2 years because he's valuable to the department. And that's where, to me, it's very disappointing. And I understand ESPN kind of got caught up in this one. Like, they've had their own layoffs. This was Iger saying we're letting go of 7,000 jobs. They weren't just going to say, you know what, ESPN, you've already done this. But they're now sawing down to the bone. And that's good for profits. It's not good for people. So cast members aren't different than other companies. And now you could argue all the companies are doing this. That's fine. That's true. It doesn't make it right. And it's not needed, which we're going to see in November when we see the earnings report and how much money that ESPN is still making. And so that's where it's frustrating. And that's where also it's tough to see ESPN these days as a destination place, right? When we were growing up, I was born in 74. ESPN came to be in 79. So I grew up on sports. And I mean, I had a Cal Ripken like streak for about, I don't know, early when it first started into like my junior year of college, where I think I went every day without missing Sports Center, right? The joke in my house with my parents was I was studying from 5:30 to 6. If I knew the math or not, I was done at 6. I was watching Sports Center back in the day then. But the idea of it's still the leader. I said last week, it's the Yankees of sports media. It's still number one, but it's just kind of like the Yankees. The Yankees haven't won in a long time. They're kind of like the Yankees. They might still be the Yankees, but until they start winning some championships again, they're not really the Yankees. I think as a company, they're well positioned. Jimmy Pitaro, who's the chairman of ESPN, and Burke Magnus, they have set ESPN up well in terms of as a company, in terms of all the live rights they own. But in terms of a place that you want to work at, I'm not sure it's really that anymore.
Before we go into topic 2, I also want to just talk about the morale in Bristol and among ESPNers. It is as low as any time I've ever seen. And I really question the strategy of doing these layoffs in 3 phases. There is, of course, phase 1 that only affected Disney. Phase 2 is happening this week, and it's really affecting a lot of people that work at ESPN. Phase 3 is coming at the beginning of the summer, probably June. It's going to affect even more people. And then there's sort of a little talked about 4th phase. It's going to be a prolonged phase where it's going to involve the talent as well. Disney will say that they think that this is, 7,000 jobs that are affected. I think it's 3,000 open positions and 4,000 people. And they're going to say that this is sort of a more humane way of doing it to make sure that it's not 7,000 all in 1 week or all in 2 weeks, that it's easier to spread across. It appears pretty obvious to me that there are a lot of legal reasons, and they're just trying to get all their ducks in a row and it makes it a really difficult place to work when you don't know when you let go of people like Soltys or Russell Wolff. You don't know if that's going to go and affect you, and it makes it the morale there is as low as I've ever seen.
And Brian Curtis from The Ringer, he had a good stat in his column. I mean, it's really a bad stat, but an interesting stat. 1,100 jobs have been lost over the last decade at ESPN. 1,100. That's a big number. And here's the thing that I get to at the end, right? Again, I talk about Disney and the cast members, and they try to act as if they're different. But like, you don't feel like you're in a foxhole with the person next to you, unfortunately, because it's all about the numbers at the end of the day on the sheet that's going to come out in November. That's what it's about. And I understand that's big business. Disney's $1 billion company, but like, there's no real loyalty. There are people who protect their friends there. Yeah, and that does happen. There are people who are protected. But at the end of the day, Chris LeBlanco was the one who decided to Mike Soltys. It was his time. The thing about it is it creates an environment that someone might say that to Chris LeBlanco at some point. And so if you don't stand up when someone has the merit to remain there, it just kind of, that's the feeling you have at a place, and it's lesser for it. And so we can pretend like the guts of the place hasn't changed over the last 10 years, but it has. It was a place that was never affected by this stuff, and now it's the place where you kind of expect it. And that's a huge difference in terms of how it's viewed, and it says something about the overall company, and it's a shame. It doesn't mean that they're not going the right direction overall. I do believe in what they're doing, but in terms of being an employee there, it's not a great place to be, unfortunately.
Andrew, let's go to topic 2, which is affiliated with topic 1, and the paradox of ESPN spending so much to keep certain people on air talent at the same time that they're cutting 7,000 jobs. Just last week, we saw Pat McAfee tweet out a picture of him with Bob Iger, suggesting that McAfee is about to come in to a huge payday at ESPN. You have some reporting on that, don't you?
I don't think that's definitely happening. I think it's possible. They're definitely in on it. I think NBC's in on it. Even though I don't know this for certain, I think I could see Fanatics as a wild card. Amazon, we've mentioned, they seem to maybe not be in the lead at the moment. And McAfee's kind of a wild card of what he'll do. So there's no telling exactly what he'll do. But the idea that you just laid off all these people and then you add Pat McAfee is kind of weird. Like that you re-sign Marcus Spears for nearly $2 million a year. That makes some sense, right? You have a successful show, you still have to do business. And I'm not saying like, look, McAfee they might look at as like this is a chance that he's the hottest young talk show host, and there's a chance to get him on your air, and that might make sense. And I've been told that they only do it if it makes financial sense. But it is odd when you have people walking out the door, and you might bring in some big signings. Could they sign NFL analysts? It's just like, well, what's the money? And that's where also I think where people, a lot of people will point to like the Buck Aikman signings, right? And be like, they spend $33 million a year on those two guys to redo their Monday Night Booth. Now, obviously the money has gotten insane in terms of the NFL booths. I don't think one really has to do with the other. And that's why, to me, it's also really frustrating, because let's just say they hadn't signed Buck and Aikman. Do you think the cuts would be any different today than they are?
No, I think they would be in exactly the same place as they are. And that's the one thing about this. Like you said, they still have a business to run. They do. How many 24/7 TV stations do they have in addition to, websites and streaming services as well? And they need to make sure that those shows are good enough and big enough to bring in viewers. I think where the business overall is going to see an effect of this is it is clear that Disney/ESPN is in cost-cutting mode. I mean, it's clear. They just, they're laying off 7,000 jobs. This is something that we talk about all the time. This is almost like a greatest hits. But when they go out to the rights deals, and when they start to negotiate with various leagues and conferences, this is where you're going to see that cost cutting come in. They need the NBA. They want the NBA. They're going to pull out all the stops for the NBA. We see what happened with MLS. We see what's happening right now with the Pac-12. They have not engaged at all with NASCAR. NASCAR's doing pretty well with NBC and with Fox, so that's likely going to renew there. But they're making decisions that ESPN of a decade ago would never. ESPN of a decade ago would have been involved with all these discussions.
100%. Last thing I would say is, Disney, happiest place on earth, but they make a lot of their employees feel like crap. And so that's a real problem to me going forward. And again, at the end of the day, it's only about the numbers. Was it due to the stock price? What are the numbers going to look like when they break out their financial earnings? But in terms of actually working there and being different, it's not different, unfortunately. Let's move off ESPN. And there was all kinds of news everywhere you looked, from Fox with Tucker Carlson to CNN with Don Lemon, both being let go on the same day. And then the day before, a bombshell, NBC Universal CEO Jeff Shell was out in a Sunday surprise before the Lemon and Tucker Carlson news hit. What did you think of that?
Yeah, that was certainly a Sunday shocker. Jeff Shell, one of the legendary media executives, certainly that I've covered, admitted to an inappropriate relationship with a colleague. It turns out that it was a CNBC anchor, and effective immediately, he was out as NBC Universal CEO. My first instinct when I saw that on Sunday was that this is not good news for NBC Sports, because Shell is a big sports fan. He has front row seats to see the Dodgers. He's somebody who grew up with Fox Sports. He understands the value of sports, and he's made a lot of big decisions in sports. He was one that was really primarily responsible for shutting down NBC Sports Network when that shut down, which was a total surprise. He has been, over the past year, the one person that's really been pushing sports to move on to Peacock, because he's trying to build up the subscriber base over at Peacock. But when I called up a bunch of sources at NBC Sports and I asked them about losing Jeff Shell and what's going to be different, I heard the same answer from everybody. Nothing really changes. Mark Lazarus is a longtime sports and media executive. He's probably going to become much more involved. He still was involved. Pete Bavacqua still runs NBC Sports Group. And most importantly, the person that's replacing Shell, at least initially, is a guy called Mike Cavanaugh. Well, he's a finance guy. He's being primed to take over for Brian Roberts when and if Brian Roberts ever retires. Brian's dad, Ralph Roberts, never retired. So the idea of Brian Roberts retiring is something that I don't see happening. But you can expect Mark Lazarus to have much more of a hand in it. You can expect Pete Bavacqua to still remain doing what he's doing. And you can expect NBC's strategies as it pertains to the coming NBA rights deal, as it pertains to, the Big Ten that's going to be on this fall for the first time. Those are going to continue. Where you might see some changes at the edges, as I'm keeping my eye on Peacock. I'm seeing that if something changes in how they deliver sports to Peacock, but right now the message that I'm getting is everything's going to be business as usual. All right, after layoffs and sexual harassment claims, and let's get up to a different topic, Andrew. The NFL draft is coming up. I know you're a big fan of it. You watch everything. What do you stay on primarily?
So I'm primarily on ESPN. I just going back to the Chris Berman days, Kuiper. I always love Kuiper. I like when they stick with the draft people. I find that they're not as opinionated as they once were. And we played that classic clip of Kuiper talking about the Jets draft. I think when they took Jeff Lageman, and he just said they don't understand the draft. That was tremendous. He's a little bit more. He has opinions, but he's just not as aggressive, which kind of happens with age and success, where people get a little less aggressive in terms of what they say. But I usually stick with ESPN mostly. I will have, though, the other two on, go with a 3 TV approach. But largely I go ESPN. I do think Daniel Jeremiah, that was something that during the pandemic when they combined it, Daniel Jeremiah, though, he has emerged as he's one of my favorites, though, on NFL Network in terms of as a draft expert. I just find his stuff really good.
Andrew, I shouldn't admit this because we cover sports media. And the NFL draft gets a lot of viewers. It's a huge TV draw. I hate it. I hate everything about it. It's like you're just getting up there and reading a list of names and people giving opinions. And 5 years from now, the opinions end up not being correct. And we bring out all those all that video and audio. I do watch it because it is a big event. I do go to because I'm not a fan of the draft. I go to ABC because I want to hear background stories about the players. I love the schmaltz around like the family and some of those stories that sort of get you to know a lot of these players better. I would think that most of the people listening to this pod who are big sports fans are like you with ESPN or over at NFL Network. But I am a day one guy and I'm a day one on ABC.
Yeah, that's probably my least favorite. Not that they don't do a good job with that. I just don't need the musical acts, and I just like the opinions about the teams. I mean, yeah, it's stupid, the whole thing. I mean, we talk about it. We like, how stupid are we? We are the ones talking about the people who are reading the names. So that's what we're doing. But I mean,
talk stupid. Absolutely.
Exactly. We take the cake.
Can I add one more thing on this? Is well, what we've been killing ESPN today, just in terms of cost cutting and everything. And I don't think we're going to see any evidence at ESPN in terms of cost cutting during the draft. I think it's going to be a robust production like it usually is. I'm keeping my eye on an NFL Network, because a decade ago, NFL Network started its own draft coverage, and it's really good. But NFL Network has been cutting costs as well, as has been reported. It had a bunch of layoffs about 2 months ago. How are we going to see that translate on screen? Because I think there's a better chance of us seeing that with NFL Network, certainly, than with ESPN.
Yeah, you could see that. I don't think, Michael Irvin still suspended, looks like questionable if he'll return after the alleged incidents at the Super Bowl. And the NFL is cutting back with NFL Network. I mean, how can you not cut back? They just signed, the NFL did contracts that go into the 2030s that are just for $110 billion. So, of course, you have to come back. You have to cut at that point, right? I mean, that seems obvious. So, NFL, like ESPN, doing really well.
I think, Andrew, by the way, I think we need do we need a Chris Mason rim shot to come at the end of that comment right there?
We'll give it to us now, Chris.
All right.
But the bottom line is, yeah, they're cutting back despite the fact that now they could say it's different. One's different than the other. The NFL has $110 billion coming in, and they're letting people go. Again, I understand it's big business, $110 billion. Anyway, people just
it is. I can't believe I'm about to defend the NFL.
Okay,
because it is $110 billion. I only want $1 billion of that. But I think an NFL Network, like all the league networks, is seeing cord cutting hit it much harder than an outfit like ESPN, which is tied to ABC and all these other Disney channels as well. So the business
but isn't it important as a brand though for the NFL to make sure that their product is really good? And I mean, look, they have a lot of good people still there, but like overall that they have a really good product. I mean, they do a good job of Good Morning Football. Rappaport's obviously going head to head with Schefter every day. But I don't know. I just feel like you don't want to fall behind with that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, of course, but it is where the market's headed. And I think we're going to see that at all these league-owned networks.
Let's finish up staying in the cable world, the RSNs, which has been a huge topic. We talked about it a little bit last week after you sat down with Adam Silver at the CAA World Congress presented by Sports Business Journal. What do you think that's going on? What's the latest with the RSNs, John?
I did a story in my newsletter on Monday that was just sort of Adam Silver's comments compared with Rob Manfred's comments, the commissioner of MLB, of course. And I think that they both have a similar idea moving forward. And it's sort of like the idea of where the RSN business is going is really starting to crystallize. And people like me, I'm still a happy cable bundle subscriber. I'm still going to be able to watch baseball games or basketball games via my multi-channel video subscription. Going into the future, though, the way is you're going to be able to stream these games as well, and you're not going to have blackouts in anything. So there's going to be. This is where everybody's moving. I don't know when it's going to happen, but within like 2 or 3 years, you can be an Orioles fan in New York watching every Orioles game, or you could be, and that would just be your local game that you would end up watching. What's going to be very interesting about this is that the cable and satellite operators, the RSNs right now, they have exclusivity. They pay a lot in rights fees for these rights, and they don't want to share them with anybody. Rob Manfred said, cable's going to pay a lot less. The cable and satellite distributors are going to pay a lot less going forward, but they're also going to give up exclusivity. So the idea that you can go to ESPN Plus, hit a drop-down menu and just say like, you know what, I want to see Mike Trout tonight, or I want to see my favorite team tonight. And you can just sort of make those decisions, which for baseball is a pretty big thing because baseball is a hugely popular sport locally. It's really fallen a little bit nationally. And I think that they feel that this is a way to start to build back a national base.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Manfred's comments were the cleanest I've heard in terms of what the future is. I'm probably going to do something soon about that. And I thought that was the cleanest way to say it, where you could have, because how does that work, right? With the RSNs, if you can just go and buy, I guess, individual games, is that what you're getting at there? At other places online, basically with digital distribution. I just don't know how it works, like in baseball, how you get around the Yankees exclusivity in market. Like, I don't know how you get around that.
They won't have exclusivity in market. You won't have exclusivity in.
They're not going to give that up.
Why wouldn't they give it up? Well, the Yankees might not give it up, but if you're in Baltimore, it's like you just are able to see whatever game you want to see, and so long as you subscribe to this extra innings package, that will have no blackouts.
I guess, but does that work with the Yes Network?
That's baseball's biggest problem. Is it's not just the Yes Network.
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Does that work with the Dodgers, with the Red Sox, with the Cubs, the biggest brands, the most popular teams in baseball? Yeah, that's the big issue that they're going to have to overcome.
All right, man. That's going to do it for the pod for this week. We thank everyone for listening. If you can like it, you can subscribe, leave a comment. We appreciate that. As always, the master of the board is Chris Mason. AC Wyatt puts it all together. Reggie Walker also does a lot to help make this all go. And so we appreciate all of them, and we appreciate all of you.
Can I give one quick shout out, Andrew, end of the pod, to B-Town 4201, who left a very nice comment saying that, telling me to keep up the O's talk because it's great to hear John give them love. So B-Town, which in DC is Bethesda. I don't know if he's from Bethesda or not, but I will endeavor to keep talking about Adley Rushman, Gunnar Henderson, and the rest of the high-flying Orioles.
On behalf of everyone else, nobody wants to hear about the Orioles. Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for listening.